During the final battle, the kids are really the ones who kickstart it, not Helen, who was the protagonist up to that point. The scenes where Jack-Jack displays his powers are not very relevant to the main plot, as in the final battle, the only thing that you have to do is remove a pair of glasses. There isn't really a good theme to this movie. The theme in the first movie was that being with family is just as important as being a super. However, in this movie, Helen learns the opposite message. And Evelyn's entire motivation is that society has become too reliant on superheroes. However, the Pars don't learn anything from it, and it is simply moved out of the way instead of confronted at the end. Once upon a time, there was a superhero named Elastigirl. Every day she tried to fight crime along with her family, but failed. One day she was offered the chance to create good publicity for supers. Once upon a time, there was a superhero named Elastigirl. Every day she filmed herself doing superhero work in order to create good publicity for superheroes. One day she discovers a screenslaver who is trying to push an agenda that the supers are ruining society. Because of that, well, the next major plot point is Helen finding out that Evelyn is behind the screenslaver, and after that, it is entirely up to the kids to move the plot along. Winston isn't really relevant to the main plot. All of the things that he does, such as inviting the supers to film their actions and holding the summit, could have easily been done by Evelyn. Helen is comfortable with doing superhero stuff, and she gets to do superhero stuff. We clearly see that Helen doesn't have any problem doing the superhero stuff. She also is completely fine with leaving her family, as when she calls, 2/3 of the phone call is spent bragging to Bob about how much fun she's having. The ending is exactly the same as the ending of the first movie. The main villain has been defeated, superheroes are illegal, and the Pars have learned to work together. The decision to make this film just a superhero movie instead of a parody of a superhero movie is made worse by the fact that superhero movies have grown massively in popularity since the first movie was released, which removed all of the originality. The entire reason that DevTech wants to make supers legal is that Winston and Evelyn's father was killed by robbers after he couldn't get help from supers. Evelyn says that he should have gone to the safe room. However, it doesn't make sense that he wouldn't put the super phones in the safe room, since he knew that he would be in danger if he ever had to use them. Brad Bird has confirmed that Bob and Helen switching roles was a major inspiration of this film, which is further proof that this is essentially a copy of the first film. Because Bob and Helen switched roles, Helen had to be the one to go do superhero stuff. I think Frozone would have been better in that role, partially because he has no children, and partially because he doesn't really have any arc in this movie. While in the first movie, he was one of Bob's main motivations to do the superhero stuff that causes the conflict. This is very clearly a reskinned version of the first film. Superheroes are illegal, despite being made legal at the end of the first film. The Pars are contacted by a private company wanting to legalize supers, and then that company turns out to be evil. There are many examples of unreasonable opinion change. A. Helen spends the entirety of the first film trying to convince Bob about how important it is to be present in the family, but in this film she wants to do the exact same thing that Bob wanted to do in the first film. In fact, she even jokes about this during one of the scenes in New Urbum. B. The Pars and Frozone get blamed for the destruction that the Underminer caused, even though they didn't get blamed for the destruction that the Omnidroid caused in the first film. C. Bob's arc revolves around learning how to take care of the kids, with the idea being that he has never had to do that before, even though we can see him doing it very well in the first film. And D, Violet and Dash don't have any arcs or goals. In this film, Violet doesn't care about anything except Tony, even though in the first film we clearly saw her get past that. Dash also doesn't have any motivations or conflicts, while in the first film, he learned how not to be impatient and manipulative. The closest thing that they have to an arc is that they have to learn how to work with Jack Jack. However, Edna is almost entirely responsible for Jack Jack being trained. In point 12, I explained how this film was a reskin version of the first film. In my opinion, they should have embraced the release date gap and made this film set around 10 years after the first one. At the beginning, Helen is unusually resistant to working with DevTech, despite this being the par's only option for making a living and protecting their children. During the final battle, the only thing that the main characters have to do is remove a pair of glasses. In the first movie, the stakes continuously escalated throughout the movie, while in this movie that doesn't happen, and you could argue that the opposite happens. Also, Evelyn monologues her entire plan to Helen, which is something that the first film actively made fun of. Also, why has nobody thought of closing their eyes when the hypno glasses are put on? A lot of this film's plot consists of points that Brad Bird wanted to develop in the first film but couldn't due to runtime constraints. Helen's final test consists of doing something that she has been good at since the beginning of the movie. It doesn't resolve any of Helen's internal conflicts. This contrasts with the first film where the Omnidroid battle resolved Bob's desire to work alone. It sure is convenient that there was a monitor in the screenslaver's apartment showing Helen's suit cam that was there for no reason at all. This movie has many building blocks of the first movie, only they weren't rearranged. In the first film, Bob's main arc was a good enough metaphor for a normal person's work-life balance to be identifiable with. However, this film doesn't have that, as Bob is never mad at Helen for doing the superhero work, and Helen doesn't really learn anything about what a good life-work balance looks like. Helen is invited to make superheroes legal by a private company, successfully changes the public opinion, discovers that the private company is evil, but then successfully defeats them. It is exactly the same as the first film.